He's brought back, and Michael cries a single tear onto his body, and that tear brings him back to life. Not quite. The 10C magically just bring him back from the dead by capturing his teleportation signal at the last moment. As you do. Not to be confused with the Star Trek Enterprise episode Home. This is the Star Trek Discovery episode Coming Home. Adding another link to the chain of the long, boring, uninspired names of recent Star Trek episodes. Coming Home is the season finale of Discovery. This also ends our third day of Star Trek twofers. Last 3 weeks I should say, we've had Star Trek Picard and Star Trek Discovery airing back to back. You'd think that would be exciting, but in this day and age, that just ain't so. This was the last episode of this season, and I'm glad it's over. But to give you a brief overview of my thoughts on the whole season so far up front, I would say this is the best season yet. We're trading mindless action and mind-numbing visual effects and a visual spectacle to make anyone vomit for mystery, ambiguity, boredom, and emotion. As I've said before many times reviewing Discovery, this season in particular, boring nothing is way better than an annoying something. So, yeah, we're just kind of polishing up a turd when we're putting lipstick on a pig. But isn't that 1% better than no lipstick on the pig? Without further ado, let's dive down, drill into the warm, creamy center of Star Trek Discovery Season 4, Episode 13, Coming Home. Title of the episode kind of spoils what happens. We know we survive in the end if we're coming home. Lots of bizarre visual references, I think, possibly accidentally on behalf of the people developing this episode. Lots of weird visual references to Star Trek the Motion Picture. My favorite Star Trek film is 1979's The Motion Picture. Your opinion may vary, and that's fine. There's a lot of fantastic Star Trek films, as well as a lot of bad ones. But you'll notice a few times, if you're looking for it, strange scenes that call to mind events from TMP. And I'll get that out of the way up front. It ends similar to TMP. In TMP, spoilers, we had V'ger returning the Enterprise to Earth in a flash of light. Same thing happens here, but with the DMA. And we've had a scene where a Vulcan attempts to communicate with an unknowable alien force, only to end up in a bed being surrounded by people trying to get information from them. In this episode, Tarina tries to communicate with the 10C and then ends up in a bed. Remember that, like with Spock? Again, if you didn't see TMP, you need to go see it. And I will just possibly put a warning sometime before this to say spoilers for TMP. Go watch it. It aged good, I think. And not to go off on a tangent too hard, but I think, to me, I love TMP because of what it added to Star Trek. It gave us the refit Enterprise. It gave us the Jerry Goldsmith music. Very influential and a key part of Star Trek canon. I'll leave it at that. Back to Coming Home. Again, every episode of Discovery is just a small part of a larger movie, for better or for worse. We're continuing off from last episode. We're inside the hyperfield. And are you as confused as I am about the geometry of the situation? What's a hyperfield? What's a bubble? Where's the power source? What's the plasma field? What is I don't know. I felt if they were going to do a zoom out, an exploded view of the situation, just to give me the full picture. This was the time to do it. They did not do it, and I felt a little bit ripped off. We're inside the hyperfield, as it were, the home of the planet, I guess, where the 10C live. I don't know if the 10C even get a real name in this episode. I think we got that stolen from us as well. They don't attempt to name themselves. Perhaps it would just be whatever their word is for people. I don't know. We're trying to communicate with them. And if you remember last time, Endoy, at the behest of Tarka, launched a plasma exhaust from one of the nacelles to cut a hole for Book's ship to fly through to go attack the power source for the hyperfield. Endoy turns herself in at the beginning of this episode. There's no need to confine everyone to quarters. It was me. I admit it. I did it. And I was thinking, well, holy crap. There's the last we're going to see of that character. Bye-bye. You're going off to a colony. But no. I won't spoil it, but she pretty much gets away with it. In Star Trek fashion, if you can do anything you want, no matter how crazy it is, but if you save the universe, you're okay. Doesn't mean you should keep doing it. It's one of those things we look back upon on Star Trek and complain about. Right? You look back at it and you say, that didn't age well, or that was dumb, so don't do it again. Precedence doesn't make it okay. I bring it up a lot in these reviews, but it bears repeating, especially here. Endoy has admitted that she collaborated with Tarka. Of course, was this before or after Tarka took Reno and Book hostage, Michael says, much to the shock of Endoy. Holy crap, I've been played by Tarka. Haven't we all been played by Tarka in this season? Book and Reno are in a hollow prison on their ship, and a happenstance jostle of the ship happens to free up a cat collar from the pile of garbage that was stacked in the corner, and Book happens to find it. If that cat collar had not have fell on the floor at that one time, very well could have destroyed Earth and Navarre and the moon, as well as other places. Just think about the insanity of this. Like, why would you not write it so Book wasn't immediately scrambling trying to find the cat collar and trying to do it while hiding from Tarka? Make it look like he wasn't looking for the cat collar. To fill you in on what this cat collar is, the cat actually had to have a way to go in between holographic shields. She didn't like hollows, according to Book, so he created a collar for the cat so she could actually walk through holographic walls in the shape of a cat door. A cool looking visual effect, but why didn't we write it so that he was always looking for it at the time? Again, many inexplicable writing choices in this episode. Things that you could have wrote with just one line, throwaway line, just to alleviate my concerns. It's very strange, and you'll see another one coming up in a moment. That's how Reno and Book get free of Tarka's shield, and how they forcibly commandeer Book's ship back from Tarka. Tarka he's been reduced to a child, and not in an unfortunate and disappointing way, but in a way that I understand for somebody who's finally broken down, finally given up, and now his speech is no longer playing lip service to logic or math or science or objectivity or reason. He's saying, why isn't Oros here to stop me now? He would have stopped me. Why can't he stop me? And he's crying, and I connected with the character in that moment. It's sad we had to villainize him and make him the bad guy, but I think I got it in that moment. I felt it in that moment, that he just wanted to go somewhere where he had friends who understood him. He wanted to go home at the cost of everyone else losing their home. Selfish, stupid, but a little bit interesting on screen. However, it feels to me like this was written later. It feels like a late addition to the script. This whole plot point about Tarka needing a power source from it. Doesn't that feel like they needed a villain, and they had to have a reason for his goals to be at odds with the goals of our heroes? And then they just created a power source that he would need to use to power something. Doesn't that sound contrived? Doesn't that sound like it was written towards the end of the script writing process? Am I crazy? It just feels contrived, because one would imagine that Federation scientists would have actually helped him somehow. I mean, the Federation has been returned to form because of the events of Season 3. You know, it feels like we could have maybe had a detachment of Federation scientists working on this power source for him, in return for other projects. He was working on alternative propulsion methods. That's good. Maybe we can do a give and take on that. We can trade some ideas around. Maybe he can go home. Maybe we can get some new warp drive thing. It just sounds a little bit far-fetched that one would risk the fate of the universe because they have to get a battery, essentially. A little strange, contrived, but made for an okay story that had many instances of poetic romanticism, we'll say. You see at the end of this episode, Tarka has his little teleportation device that he needs the hyperfield power source to use to go to what he believes is essentially his heaven, if you would permit it. You see at the end of the episode, you think he's dead, but then he's ambiguously gone. Okay? Same thing happened with Oros. There was an attack on that Emerald Chain facility. We see Oros gone. No trace of him anywhere. Did he teleport away to Kaelis? Or did he die? Did Tarka teleport away to Kaelis? Or did he die? Interesting that him and Oros would suffer the same fate, essentially. Where did they go? Are they dead? Is there such a thing as Kaelis? And if the teleporter did work, what if it just teleported them to null space? What if they just immediately died where they went? Who knows? All I know is that Tarka erroneously believes that Book's friends could be there too. And look, we can go to Kaelis together, Book. Listen, Leto and Kaihim, they're going to be there too. And then Reno very wisely points out, you don't know that. That's bullshit. They're not going to be the same people, even if they are there, because it's another dimension. You're lying. The voice of reason. Reno was fantastic in this episode. Best scene in this episode, in my opinion, was Reno returning to the Discovery. At the last moment, Book gives Reno a comm badge so she can return to Discovery and inform people that we do need to stop Book at any cost. And by the way, Michael, Book loves you. Great scene. We are so embedded in years of Discovery writing that to see Reno be so calm, so cool, so collected on the bridge, informing the captain of what she needs to do. Didn't miss a beat. Totally on point. It just shocks you when you see how something can be written in that way, because we are swimming in the water of Discovery, right? You can't explain to a fish what water is. Neither can we explain to the modern Star Trek viewer what normal Star Trek writing is, because we don't have the tools in our mind to comprehend it anymore. Go back in this episode. If you're going to watch any of it, watch the section where Reno returns to Discovery. She is not the least bit fazed by being in possibly the tightest situation any human being has ever been in. And she's totally on point, totally where she needs to be mentally, not crying, not having a mental breakdown, and most importantly, not showing weakness to the crew. She inspires confidence at all times, and she should have been the captain. Okay? Reno for captain. Let's get rid of Michael. Let's put Reno in the center seat. Am I alone in that thinking? Maybe it should be Saru, but humor me for a moment. So we know we need to kill Book, okay? We have been trying to stop Book now, by any means necessary, for like 4 episodes now. Every dang episode of this season is the same. We had the arc at the beginning where nothing happens, the arc in the middle where we waste time to figure out things we don't need to know, And then the arc at the end where we're chasing Book. We go, nothing happening. No, we go, tragedy, the shit blowing up. Nothing happening. Oh my god, we need to kill Book. That's season 4. So if you rewind the clock and you look back at the first episode or the first few of this season, Book is dealing with the loss of his home planet. Book's planet is destroyed. So Book's life is at the beginning of this season. He's instrumental to the beginning of the season, and he bookends the end of this season. So this is Book's story. This is Book owned this season, if you think about it. And conveniently at the end, I know I'm jumping ahead here, Book survives somehow, as if this is, again, like I said with Picard, a Disney TV movie. He's brought back, and Michael cries a single tear onto his body, and that tear brings him back to life. Not quite. The Tensi magically just bring him back from the dead by capturing his teleportation signal at the last moment. As you do. Book comes back at the end, and his punishment from Starfleet is to aid in the relocation of humanoid sentience to and from Earth in order to reverse their evacuation methods. Remember season 3 Book? At the very beginning, he was relocating animals back to their home planet. Now he's relocating humans and the like back to their home planet. So he's come full circle. Interesting, eh? He came full circle. He found love, he found loss, and then he returned to what he was doing at the beginning. It's beautiful in a way. If it weren't so stupid. I mean, how beautiful can something be if it's punctuated every 5 seconds by contrived nonsense, really? You really have to massage the script a lot in order to get something out of it. And sometimes I feel like I'm giving it too much leeway. But that's what you have to do if you're going to try to watch Discovery, if you're going to try to watch Picard. If you didn't know, in the background of our main plot, we're trying to evacuate Earth, Navarre, Titan, basically populated places in the debris field of the DMA, which is rapidly approaching. And Starfleet headquarters, the kind of seashell-shaped ship that it is, it looks really cool sideways. It's warping through space sideways, and it's detaching parts of itself in order to help evacuate people. Very cool visuals. Very well done. I prefer the look of it sideways, and I still don't understand what the strange shapes on the outside are really for. Maybe that's the nacelle, for all I know. I don't know. But you'll note that what keeps happening in Star Trek Picard and Star Trek Discovery is evacuations. How many times now in 4 seasons of Discovery and 1 and a few episode seasons of Picard did we have to evacuate planets and stuff? I think we're kind of out of ideas here. Something's coming and we have to evacuate people. And doesn't it always turn out that our technology is not enough to evacuate enough people? We couldn't evacuate hardly anybody on Romulus. And we find out that on Earth we could evacuate maybe 450,000 people. Come on! It's 3,100 something. How many evacuations did you have to do by this point in order to not be able to really do a good job of it, essentially? Like, come on. You had programmable matter. Can we shoot down programmable matter shuttles around people's individual bodies and then shoot them through space in stasis? Create life pods for everybody and just have the life pods float away? Is there some way we can do that? I guess I'm just upset that we keep seeing the same thing over and over again in these shows with evacuating a planet and then just replaying that old tape over and over again, expecting me to care. You know, the definition of insanity being what it is. So Discovery has this idea to use Endoy. Hey, you know, Endoy, why don't you get her out of confinement? We're going to use her for one last mission. And I was hoping that she would die. You know what, Endoy? It would be very poetic if you went on the suicide mission and died. But she doesn't. She takes a shuttle, flies it into Book's ship to try to blow it up in like a suicide attack. And Michael, sadly, gives this order knowing it may kill Book. Of course, Book, we know, survives in the end. And so does Endoy. Endoy gets transported out. Book is quote-unquote dead. Revived later. and Endoy stays around to suck up her just desserts for having saved the universe. Not. It got infinitely worse because of Endoy. Yeah, you saved the day, but you had to create the problem first that you needed, that required you to save the day. So no, you don't get to talk to the president at the end. You get to go to a colony for the rest of your life. That's where you get to go, Endoy, because you betrayed the president, you betrayed the captain, and you betrayed all of Earth. Okay, and you acted of your own accord to vastly increase the percentage failure of a critical mission. It's pretty cut and dry. I don't know why she's walking around free. Happened before in Star Trek? Doesn't make it okay. So we're wrapping things up, and the welcoming party gets sent down to what appears to be a planet occupied by the 10C. They go down there, and of course Sarah has his little translation device, and they're explaining to them that, listen, your baronite mining procedure, it's bad, and it's ruining our planets, and we're gonna die because of you getting baronite or whatever it is. So can you turn that off? And they're like, okay, we'll move our operations to somewhere else that's less occupied. If you were expecting a twist or some kind of aggravating factor to make things more exciting in this episode, you're not getting it. This episode plays out exactly as you assumed it would play out. Which is boring, but at least it's not disgustingly terrible. The 10C also are pleaded to by Book to turn off the hyperfield. He appeals to them in such a way that you shouldn't need the hyperfield, and you shouldn't need to be afraid of seeing the outside universe and all that, and blah, blah, blah. Similar to how Starfleet turned off its cloaking shield around its headquarters. One person, Book, manages to convince the 10C to turn off the hyperfield protecting them from something. And I'm thinking, like, holy crap. What? We're just, like, what if they need that? Like, what if they will die without it? Are you sure that you want to try to ask them to do that? That was a significant leap. You've already got them to turn their DMA off. And now you're telling them to turn off their hyperfield. You turn off their shield around their world. And I'm just like, maybe that can come later. Maybe we can take the small victories now, okay, Book, and not threaten anything anymore. Let's not look a gift horse in the mouth here. But we're telling them to turn off their shield, right, around their world, supposedly. And meanwhile, Earth protected itself in the same episode with a shield. We probably should have told them, why don't we work together to find an alternate way of powering your shield? Or we should have inquired as to what is the nature of your shield. Do you need this to actually live? What if they cannot be exposed to the outside universe in the way we can? Did we think of that? Like, a very bold leap in logic. Par for the course for this season. Assumptions abound. Okay. Remember, we went to see the 10C just assuming they were sentient. For like 8 or 9 episodes straight. What if they weren't? What if they got there and there was no 10C species? And it was just some tool that was forgotten on and they don't know how to stop it? Could have been, could have been. In this episode, Tarina at one point decides to try to do a mind meld with the 10C. I know I mentioned this before, but now I'm digging more into it. I saw this in this episode. Tarina put her hand on the window, like this, of the Discovery, and communicated with all of the 10C at the same time. And I involuntarily dropped my head into my hands and just weep for the lapse in logic here as to why was there not one Vulcan earlier? Not even one on the ship who volunteered to just mind meld with the window. If it was that easy, all you had to do was touch the window. Are you kidding me? Is this a joke? Is this real? All you had to do was touch the window to mind meld with the 10C? Think of what you could have gleaned. It ends up being ineffectual in this episode, but they wouldn't know that beforehand. Not one Vulcan tried to do it. Like, just write in a throwaway line. Have Tarina say that a Vulcan volunteer did try to mind meld with the 10C, but they weren't able to get any meaningful information out of it. Just write that in. It's one line. I just wrote it for you. Or just don't have it. How about just... I was not concerned beforehand about why a Vulcan never attempted to mind meld, because I assumed you couldn't do it through the window, or they had some kind of mental blocking field on. I was never asking that question. But because you did it once, now I'm asking the question. You added in the confusion where there was no confusion, which is one of the worst things you can do in writing. They just take a perfectly good script and say, let's confuse it up. And they just pour on their salt shaker of confusion, and then people like me have to deal with it. And oh my God, why did they do it? I don't know. Tilly, the shadowy specter of Tilly, looms large over this episode again. She is metastasized into the body of Starfleet headquarters, and she's going down with the ship. Her and the Admiral are having a drink of alcohol, as you do when your world's ending. I'll just have a sip of this mind-altering beverage, why not? I'm gonna die. Haha. Let's go down with the ship together, me and you, Tilly. Admiral, Vance, and Tilly drinking. Here's to love lost and won and whatever, and oh wait, we didn't die. Holy crap, they did it. And all is right with the world. We did communicate with the 10C. The 10C are a gigantic life form, and they didn't zoom out enough for me to really get a feel for what their exact biology was like. Can we zoom the camera out once here and there? I know I complained about this before, but I kind of wanted to see a little bit more of the 10C's whole body. Like, the 10C's body is the same color as its background, so I couldn't parse out where it ended and its world began, and vice versa. So I felt a little bit cheated, I guess. We are greeted by a delegation from the President of Earth, and the President of Earth delivers her condolences for people's losses and her commendations for the victories won. And Endoy is standing right there, and the President says something like, let's not make sure it ever gets that close to oblivion again now. Pointing at Endoy. Like, her punishment for betraying everybody is a stern talking to for a brief moment. And that's the end of Star Trek Discovery Season 4. We've gone home. The season ended as you thought it would, and it played out based on numerous contrivances and numerous leaps in logic. Frightening that this is the best season. Really, overall, I would give this season probably like a 5.5 if I had to take all of them together, including the very bad episodes. Just from my feeling, if you have never seen Star Trek Discovery, maybe just try this season. I would say it's slightly better than nothing. And in my review scale, if you know me, 5 means exact middle to me. 5 is, I didn't love it, I didn't hate it, it was exactly nothing. I feel exactly the same after watching it as I did before I watched it. That's what a 5 is. So therefore, 5.5 means it's slightly better than nothing. And I think what you get from this season, in terms of some cool visuals here and there, some cool concepts, sprinkled throughout slightly outweighs all the nonsense. It's better than season 3, better than season 2, better than season 1. Hopefully season 5 will be better. Hopefully season 5 is at least somewhat challenging plot-wise, and it's at least somewhat less boring, Far be it from me to complain about not enough stuff going on when we've seen the likes of season 2. Season 2 was a breakneck nightmare of gargantuan proportions with trillions of things happening on screen at once that I couldn't possibly pay attention to, that made me sick to my stomach. So this is a welcome change, I guess. Replacing ugly confusion with mysterious ambiguity, as I mentioned before. Philosophically in this episode, I mentioned how Tarka has experienced loss, Book has experienced loss. Book comes out on the other end, going through his character arc, returning to where he came from by working in returning people to their home. Right? He returned all those trance worms to their home. Now he's returning humans and the like to their homes. So it's an interesting character arc for Book, and I think he grew the most this episode. Tarka experienced loss and took it the wrong way and violently lashed out in a selfish way, hoping to go to a place that he didn't even know really existed. He was trying to get to heaven. He was willing to sacrifice everyone for his own trip into the afterlife. Did he get what he wanted? It's ambiguous, just like with Oros. And I commend them for putting in that ambiguity. Because for the few people who may be willing to forgive Tarka, they have that out. They can imagine that maybe he did go to Kaelis. But for the people who were not willing to side with Tarka in the end, they could just pretend he died. So we're all winning. The theme of this season, I think, is loss. And how you deal with it. I'm tired of emotional baggage and crying and letting everything get to you, which is just terminally inside the soul of Discovery at this point. I mean, this entire season was about emotion. But because you picked that as its core theme, it felt like it made more sense. A lot of the things that were annoying and didn't make sense in previous seasons were understandable and made a little bit more sense this season. It makes sense that Michael is the captain. If she's going to be dictating what everybody does, make her the captain. And they did. And it worked a little better. If you're going to have everybody spouting off every 5 seconds about their own personal tragedy, you might as well make that the theme of the season so it plays into it, correct? So we're taking our problems, we're taking our bugs, and making them a feature. And it feels holistically like a better season to me. You may hate it. I almost did. I'm willing to give it an out on a few different concepts, like I just mentioned. Some of the broader philosophical concepts in the season. And for this episode in particular, I'll give it a pass because it had some cool visual ideas with the Starfleet headquarters. It had some cool pieces of music. There was some cool thumping kind of rhythmic music that Jeff Russo put forward in this episode that I liked. So it's hitting philosophically, it's hitting musically, and it's hitting visually. But so many inexplicable scenes, so many confusing writing ideas. Endoy getting away with everything she did. The completely useless scene of Tarina trying to mind meld with Tensi. Book just happening to find a cat collar that let him use a holo disruptor to save their lives and save everything, just based on luck. Those things, when you try to operate on luck, it really drags it down, because we do not rely on luck. Luck, after all, is not a factor, and hope is not a strategy, as it were. This was Star Trek Discovery, Season 4, Episode 13, Coming Home. I'm going to have to give this one a straight 6. Just like that. It's the best I can do. The one scene with Reno returning to the Discovery gives it an extra 0.5. That one scene was so good. I replayed it multiple times. It really worked for me, and it really helped ground the situation and ground where we should be at a base level of competency in the show, that we're not hitting all the time. Michael does come back and cry in this episode. She does look weak in front of the crew. She cries in front of the 10C. We're making a first contact mission with an unknowable enemy force, and we're crying, and I don't know how they interpret it, but I mean, surely my crew does not interpret that as a good thing. I don't want my crew seeing me cry. And guess what? The audience doesn't want to see the crew cry as well. So that really hurt it. So when I say 6, I think it makes sense. I originally thought it was better on first viewing. I slept on it. I watched it a few more times. It's a 6er. Far from the worst this season has offered, and far from the worst that has been offered since new Star Trek came back on television. New Trek, as they call it. In terms of a season as a whole, I already gave this season a 5.5. What did you think? Are you going to actually try to watch it? To me, if you're going to watch any Discovery, you should watch this season. And if you're going to watch any episodes in this season, you should probably just watch the last half. There's basically no reason to watch the first half of this season. I'm sorry. This season did not need to be 13 episodes. I have no clue why this was 13 episodes. They just announced that season 5 is going to be 10 episodes. Maybe that'll be better. So here's looking forward to what we can see in season 5. Maybe it's going to be not suicide-inducing, at least. However, seeing the last episode of Picard, my hopes are not as high as they were before, because these shows are made by the same cadre of people. 45 different producers and executives. Seriously, watch the intro to any one of these shows and count how many executive producers there are. That can't be good. Anyway, to wrap it up, that was season 4, and this was Coming Home. What did you think? Did you hate it? Did you love it? Did you like my coverage of this season? That's for you to decide. I'm Lieutenant Mark, and I'm about to spore drive out of here. See ya.